Good afternoon to everyone, and I would begin by saying thank you all for being here, and also this is a reminder that we are in the same meeting that we recessed from, and we are in the same place on the agenda. So that place is discussion, and the discussion is for the commission. Am I correct, Commissioner?
Yes.
Okay. So who wants to pick up and start talking? Mr. Hewitt, do you have anything you want to add? And remind everybody to bring your microphones to where you can. If the public cannot hear, raise your hand, and we'll try to make it louder for you.
David Hewitt, Town Manager, Holden Beach. Just from an administrative note, to restart from where we left off, the board gave instruction to the staff to revise the ordinance as discussed during the meeting. Heather's memo here indicates that we have done that and are providing the reworked working draft back to the board in accordance with our understanding of the specifics that the board and desired changes that the board wanted to see put into the working draft. So that's what you have in front of you.
Is that in this packet, David?
At the end.
At the end, okay, there it is. Thank you. Well, has there been any, I haven't received any information from anyone requesting any further
No,
reductions?
Well, I mean, okay, my opinion is we went through the parking, you know, what stayed, what went last time, and that is where we are. So in my opinion, we were basically ready to go on to discussing the amended ordinance 2202 unless somebody has had a tremendous change in policy ideas of how we went through last time and made our decisions to reduce, you know, do away with the parking near private accesses, to golf carts on streets served by public accesses, and taking out some of the furthest east end parking in the interests of traffic flow, and putting the marshes on sort of an abeyance while we get a delineation. That's my sort of sketch, correct?
Correct.
So unless anybody had some really big epiphany that something should be done differently, I would think we're ready to move on to discuss the ordinance specifically.
I don't know if my thought process would rise to the level of being described as an epiphany, but I would like to share an observation, in my opinion, regarding some of the descriptions that we use in the parking zone and area table. As I detailed in my memo to the board in October and subsequently discussed at that regular board meeting, there's a specific difference between on-street and off-street parking. In our table, there are some instances of language that we use that uses the term lot and in-lot. I would recommend that the language in those half a dozen or so instances where that real estate term is used be changed to reflect verbiage that's more in line of using the terms on-street and off-street parking. It's an important difference I think in providing clarity along the lines to make sure that our ordinance is generally in sync with the general statutes regarding parking and those descriptive terms in it. And, without belaboring that point, I would ask that, I'm assuming that we're not going to be finalized here today, that when we go back, that we be provided the administrative leeway to adjust that accordingly to just so it's crystal clear and marries up with the existing general statute language.
Absolutely, David. I would absolutely say to leave that to you and staff to do, because I know how important it is to be precise in how we're defining it. So you can bring that back in the ordinance for the BOCM. You're the best people to make that definition.
And additionally, and this is a strictly administrative note, whenever we identified those zones, H1 through H, however many, a bunch of them got deleted, and I would like to be able to recalibrate those zone designations to, begin sequentially at 1, provided it's the best thing to do, give them some follow-up input with Otto on how that works with his system and also our back shop finance. So I just ask that, if need be, that we be, those zones themselves may change, not a substantive.
Right.
We don't think it'll be a substantive change, and we're not unsure whether or not we should do it, but we just want to make sure that when we come back with a reworked draft, that it's like, well, this wasn't the right zone that went with this street, so.
At your discretion.
Okay.
David, also, if you're talking about the in-lots, in other words, that would be off-street?
We haven't got to the exact language there, but it would be something very similar to the description of on-street and off-street parking, so that there is a definitive difference.
Right, and that admits.
Basically, right-of-way parking is on-street parking.
That's what I'm getting at. In other words, until we get maybe some state statute changes as to how the funds can be used, we need to be able to distinguish the difference between right-of-way, off-street, or.
Yes, that's what is going to be a requirement for that.
Right, so I can see that. That coming into play there, that's gonna help a lot. So when we get this again, instead of saying lot, it's gonna say off-street.
Or something similar to that, that's copacetic with the existing general statute language.
Yes, sir. Thank you, David.
All right, who's next?
So we need to start with the ordinances.
Yeah.
Uh,
Last time I left everybody with something that was a red line of the original ordinance with the additions of the new, and I had notes. And Heather copied something I sent her this morning that is trying to clean up, so we just have a document to look at that has my notes again and suggestions of what I would do differently if people agree with what I find unclear and go along with my suggested changes. So if you don't mind, I'll just go through each of my notes and we can discuss it. Yeah, the one today that's 2 February.
Okay, perfect.
Now, was this the document that we have here with the red lines marked through? That was the one that was.
The one from last time was the red line with a whole lot of notes. This time is what Heather handed out that has today's date on it.
Right, and then, so this is what you've added to besides what was already
No,
corrected by staff?
no. I have now taken basically what staff gave us, and I still have issues because staff made changes to a few things, but all of my different notes and questions, staff is not going to change at one person's insistence. It takes
Right.
discussion by everybody. So staff made the obvious changes that everybody agreed with, LSV not compact, straightforward things. My notes and things now have to be discussed, and if changes are made, it has to be an agreed board decision.
Okay, well, I read the document and it seemed to be okay the way it was, but I will entertain your suggestions.
Okay, I had a question last time, and this is the first time I've gotten to ask, but I'm still a little confused by the definition of driveway. The old definition specified a driveway is not open to public traffic, and that's now gone. I'm just curious why that specifically is gone.
Well, isn't that covered? Frank, can you help us with that?
As with Frank Dilworth, Lieutenant with the Holden Beach Police Department, as with most of the definition changes, this is the third time since 2014 there's been pretty deep discussion and changes in the parking ordinance. Staff made a very assertive effort to clean all of these definitions up and to make sure they aligned with general statute or state precedent, case law in some cases, and try to take out, in your specific question, to clean up some of the fluff, for lack of better words, that was in the definitions. And in that one, a driveway is not open to the public. It's for you to get to and from your house as it's designated in the site plan. And the way it was written was, my understanding was to allow that ingress and egress to both public and private properties. And when I say public, PVAs for businesses. And also, there was a very small change in there, and the parking thereof, to alleviate any violation if you parked in your driveway and your bumper was over the property line into the right-of-way. That provision was written in there so it was not considered a violation if it was your vehicle or a guest in your driveway.
Thank you.
So,
Okay. All right, if you go on to the next page and the park or parking definition, act of leaving any vehicle, blah, 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 in a stationary position for any period of time, which I've highlighted in yellow, I think that's rather vague. And I'm suggesting we might like to qualify it for picking up or dropping off people, which is frequently done at airports. Because any period of time to me really doesn't, it means nothing. It means nothing. And if it would be better if it was just listing what is acceptable to stop for a couple minutes rather than say you can't be in a stationary position for any period of time. So I'm just wondering if we could simply add, or when discharging or picking up passengers at an intersection without blocking said intersection, so that it's clear that, you can stop and do something and not get in trouble. Otherwise, I think that there needs to be a better definition of what any period of time means.
that follows the state statute again, in that it is impeding traffic if you stop in a travel lane. And that's a violation of General Statutes, Chapter 20, to stop for no reason, including loading and unloading in a travel lane. So, again, we were trying to stay in line with the state's higher authority with their, they obviously want uniformity in traffic laws. So, and I would agree that maybe it should say any amount instead of any period. Maybe that would clarify it, but I think the exception afterwards gives you the ability to stop at stop signs and like, I may be way off, but that was the intent there.
So we got state law that already takes care of that provision.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna go ahead and ask the question, Frank, because it's happening now, and I've seen it myself. When a bus or a trolley or something comes over here and they're dropping people off, I've seen them do exactly what you're just saying, right?
And
So, in order to allow for something like that to happen, this ordinance would completely prevent it. If, I don't know how to handle it, and I don't know, we may need to look at trying to make some provision for them at a public access way to drop people off, because we are now without, if we don't, if we limit the parking the way we're designating it right now, then we're not, people, that's what people are gonna have to do. So what are they supposed to do?
well, let me make sure we're all thinking the same, in the same frame of mind here. These are definitions. We're saying this is what the word park or parking means. These are, the definitions are not they're not an enforceable part of the ordinance. They are laying out what the town is saying this word means, so it's crystal clear. In a realistic standpoint, officers have discretion to enforce all traffic laws and ordinances, from a verbal warning all the way up to a state citation. So,
Well, let me ask you this way, could you, if somebody came in and pulled up to unload their family at a beach access because we had no more available parking, could you issue them a citation for doing that?
based on that
At your discretion.
definition, we'd have to go down into the ordinance deeper to actually answer that question. And I would say, without reading really deep, yes, you could, but I can tell you in the 16 years I've been here, the only thing that's ever happened is they were reminded that they were blocking an emergency access and they couldn't park there or leave the vehicle unattended.
So what you're saying is, ideally, you move something like this down into the various enforcement areas, or the definition of what is allowed, but not in the definition.
Yeah, maybe down in 7202, at the bottom where we've got the exceptions for the parks and stuff, where you can park at the parks without a permit, maybe that would be a more appropriate place to allow for loading and unloading zones, or designate with signage unloading zones.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. Do we
Yes.
need to designate a few spots that they can stop without having to worry about getting a ticket, or you asking them to move or blocking an emergency?
I mean,
access
there
or something?
are several areas on the island, the East End cul-de-sac, right here, across from Castaways, in front of 360, Ryan Williams' house, for those of y'all that don't know where 360 is.
Yeah.
Those are three examples of areas that have enough space for a designated loading and unloading zone. That I think, again, you could address further down, but I would not change the definition, but I'll do whatever the board desires.
No, that's a good explanation. We can consider it further down. Next had to do with public right-of-way versus street right-of-way. We talk about parking in the street right-of-way, and there was a definition there of public right-of-way that seemed to be all-encompassing. I personally think that the public right-of-way should be abbreviated to an area or piece of land located on town or state property reserved for the unhindered public use or access, and street right-of-way be put in that's an area or piece of land that extends from the edge of the pavement or roadbed or travel lane to the edge of the property line, which is subject to walkway, street, and utility installation and maintenance. Again, public right-of-way, street right-of-way, we talk about parking in a street right-of-way. And there was nothing in here on street right-of-way.
I think statutorily, they're the same thing. They're synonymous terms in general statute.
And then I
I
would
believe.
suggest, as written, the public right-of-way went too far. It may be a definition that is legal, but it is not then in line with what we put in our, I call it our street, our 9505. It's inconsistent, and I am striving for consistency here, even if we have to have some definitions that are not straight out of the book.
I'd like to inject something on that, because anytime you get a survey of your property on this island, and I assume anywhere else, the surveyor has always marked the full width that is designated right-of-way. Wherever the asphalt happens to be, or any utilities, it makes no difference. The right-of-way goes from point A to point B, and anything that's in between is in the right-of-way. So whenever you start trying to split out something that may be different than what's represented on the surveys, I think all of our town surveys, Tim, shows right-of-way. Most of our streets are 50 feet wide, and the right-of-way is 50 feet wide. And when you start splitting it out as something between the asphalt and the property line, that gets confusing to me.
I understand what you're saying, but then I'm trying again to make 72 and 9505 overlap here in a way that our 9505 allowances don't contradict what this says, and unhindered, what did it say? Unhindered use?
Are you wanting to say public right-of-ways or public?
I'm on public right,
I know,
yeah.
but are you wanting to call them like public access? or
Well,
something?
no, public right-of-way, the area extends from the edge of the pavement or roadbed to the edge of the property line. But it says it's reserved for unhindered public use or access. And in 9505, we are actually, with post and rope and landscape, allowing people to do something that does hinder public use or access. That's what the post and rope is about. So there's a contradiction here that we have to deal with. We have agreed that post and rope is going to stay. We have to better define it. So I don't want inconsistency between these two, and then it opens up into a big brouhaha again. So it's either that, or you can take out the word unhindered. It's reserved for public use or access, but not unhindered.
Mr. Attorney, do you have
Yeah,
anything you
town
want to put in this conversation?
No, I'm trying to juggle all of it. I'm having a hard time keeping them up in the air.
Yeah.
I think the last comment is inconsistent when you run unhindered and couple it with the definition of street private. So I think at a minimum, unhindered needs to be taken out of that definition. Does that solve it? No.
But it does match better
Yes.
with 9505. I can deal with if we just take out the word unhindered. And there's, as you say, it doesn't make it perfect, but it does get rid of a word that doesn't match with what we're doing.
Chief, you got anything to add?
Don't blame me, chief.
That's why you have two ears and one mouth.
Okay, so public right-of-way as written, except reserved for, take out the unhindered and simply say reserved for public use or access, and then the area extends and that's fine, and then we don't need street right-of-way, correct?
That's better than
Or
having
does
two.
anybody have a problem with having street right-of-way in there?
I don't think street right of way is necessary.
I beg to differ. The street and the highway right-of-way are terms within the general statutes. And just by virtue of taking it out of the town ordinance does not override
No, I put
the
it in,
provisions in the state law that describes what a right-of-way is.
I,
Now, the town can attempt to shrink wrap a definition around public right-of-way, given the desire to provide for landscaping or not provide an area in someone's property, in an area adjacent to someone's property that's in the right-of-way. But that's a disconnect in the ordinances that we have. And it is not, by virtue of deleting that term from our ordinance, it is not going to override the state law on right-of-way.
I'm going to question that taking that term out is going to remove the town's ability. You take out unhindered, in the town, you're actually relinquishing that right-of-way that the public now maintains for utilities and all of that. And it's like David said, you can give provisions that will allow you to put stuff in there that doesn't hinder the town's ability to use the public right-of-way. In other words, unhindered would need to stay in order for the town to still be able, I think, for the town to still be able to use those right-of-ways for what they're intended, for sanitary sewer, for electrical, and that kind of stuff. You take out unhindered, I think that opens it up for us not to be able to go in. You're saying it's okay to do that, and then if you allow them to do that, what happens to the provision where when you put something in the right of way, if the town has to go in, then you're putting it in there at your own responsibility. Especially if you put something in there that hinders the use of the right of way.
Also, if we're talking about land use versus parking, they're two completely different things.
Right.
And I don't think a definition in parking will apply necessarily broadly to land use in the right of way. And I think that's where staff kind of came together with the word. Because it really leaves, it gives you a clear definition parking wise, but it leaves 9505 out there on its own.
In other words, a good example would be parking on that right of way does not hinder us from being able to put sanitary sewer in the right of way. But if you say that you don't have any responsibility to leave it unhindered, then, effectively you can drive one of those down so far that we can't get it out.
Well, I'm just being clear and making sure everybody's clear. Post and rope and landscaping and anything that anybody puts in that right-of-way, street right-of-way or public right-of-way, whatever you want to call it, can be removed by the town if it's necessary to get to utilities or anything like that. So just,
Well, and I think that the definition that if you leave unhindered in there, then you are establishing that.
okay, I get it,
that's a good point.
I get it. Leave as is. Street or highway, there was and I'm sure again, it's a definition that comes from somewhere, but quite honestly, the word that was put in, connate, I believe, does not make sense from what the word means. I'm assuming what they want to say is that terms highway and street and there's synonyms. In other words, it could be a boulevard, it could be a road, it could be a whatever, but I don't it didn't make sense with the word that was selected.
That is a word the General Assembly used.
And that is,
That is a cut and paste definition.
I'm sure it is a cut and paste. If you want to leave it, that's fine. I would question where they got that definition as being it was appropriate. But if it's a cut and paste, fine, but I'm assuming they mean synonym. When we go to 7202 then, I didn't, the way that it was written to me was A and B, it was sort of more, it was more confusing than it needed to be. I think what is meant to be said overall is that it's unlawful for any person to park or leave standing any portion of any vehicle, whether attended or unattended, in any street right-of-way, intersection, or upon any public street right-of-way within 25 feet of any intersection, which had been a phrase before, and then it disappeared. And that general statement, particularly about having any portion of a vehicle in a right-of-way, to me is very important. And I just think that starting with that statement and then going on to A, B, and C makes it clear at the beginning what we're striving to do. We all know the number of times you come out in the morning and there's cars parked over the sidewalk, or they've got half of their car in the illegal parking area, and this statement clearly covers that. To then go into A, B, C, and the rest of it. And since we're not doing street right-of-way, we can get rid of those. But in 7202B, I suggest starting, parking shall not be authorized in any of the following locations or the adjacent right-of-ways. I suggest starting number 1 on Ocean Boulevard, again, just to reinforce to people that you don't park in the right-of-way of Ocean Boulevard. So those were my lead-ins for 7202 changes.
I'll comment on that one. And part of the reason we didn't do that is the streets are listed, and if you're gonna list one, I think in that section, you have to list them all, or don't. I think you go with the 25th Street, or the 25th foot intersection that says streets, I don't think you list, that's just my personal opinion, you don't list one specific Ocean Boulevard road. I mean, it's already listed that you can't park on any street, except, under the.
Okay, and I'm looking at this as an ordinance that people might actually want to do a skim and not have to go to the table and pick out finer points. And Ocean Boulevard, period, has always been a very important, you don't park in the right-of-way on Ocean Boulevard, period. So that's why I felt it made sense to simply start with it, to let it hit everybody in the face if they're looking at this. It doesn't detract any, it doesn't detract. Just like starting with my yellowed statement right after 7202, I don't think it detracts, I think it emphasizes some things that people who are looking at the ordinance might want to see as a sort of a statement right away. So if you object to it because it detracts, I understand. I'm looking for emphasis at times.
Right. And the way we look at it is from the statutory standpoint. If we write a citation for parking, we write 72A, and that's how we reference it. So 72B5, or whatever, I'm just throwing examples out there. So if you have the same thing that's in there 3 times, they'll write it under 72B5, or 72C7, or 72B8. So that's why when we put it in there one time, you throw it in there one time, and that's where.
Right, and I've not put it under an A, B, or a C so that it's a specific, just reminder to everybody. And so if you had somebody on Ocean Boulevard parked, then you would write a 7202B1,
Correct.
is what you're saying.
Well, that's true, section, 7202.
If, the way I've changed it,
Right.
yeah.
So then what would the difference be?
That there would not. So the difference would be if we added the one in there, if you're parking on Ocean Boulevard, we would write it under this new 7202B1. If you're parking on Brunswick Avenue, then it would be streets, so it would be 7202B2. And then just, B2 really covers Ocean Boulevard anyway.
I don't see the need to have two definitions for the same thing. That seems to be more confusing than not.
But you're saying if you name one street and not the other streets, that could pose a problem?
I'm not saying it could pose a problem, I mean, you have Ocean Boulevard listed there, and if I'm reading it at face value, and I see both sides of it.
Right.
If you want to skim this quickly and see where I can park, I'm going to skim it, I can't park on Ocean Boulevard. I can't park in, intersections, pedestrian sidewalks, blocking access driveways.
But if somebody's skimming it and sees
So
that
if-
one
if I
road
don't
was,
see Brunswick Avenue, why can't I park?
Park on Brunswick, that's what I'm saying,
It's
it's,
not listed. Why can't I park on Neptune Street unless I go back to the
Right.
graph and look and see? the
right, so
field
if you're
street
skimming, you may think you can park anywhere else,
except Ocean
right.
Boulevard.
So it's gonna end up being
Confusing.
parking's only allowed in designated areas.
That's what it basically comes down to.
Yeah,
That's
but-
So,
That's why just leaving it streets should be just streets.
Well, but I'm going to go back, and this is anticipating what's later on, that I have said, the issue of people parking on right-of-ways adjacent to their own property has got to be addressed. That's another reason putting on Ocean Boulevard I thought was important, because Ocean Boulevard's right-of-way is not ever going to be part of that discussion. So again, it's sort of, this document is a whole thing to me that I went through topic by topic, and that's why Ocean Boulevard popped into my head as very important, because that will never be a right-of-way parking area. So, maybe we can leave that until after we get through the whole thing and revisit it.
However you want this, do a document, however you want to do it.
Can we come back and revisit it
yeah,
when we get to
I'm
the end?
okay with that.
That's fine.
All right, the next section had to do, the next page, it had to do with construction, maintenance, service vehicle parking, which I believe we all know that this can be a real problem. I think that we need some added emphasis where contractor maintenance service vehicles are supposed to park, which is supposed to be the location they're working at. I've looked across a number of towns' ordinances, and there was one that actually has a statement, private contractor construction or maintenance service vehicles shall be restricted. Well, they were about construction, but I lumped it together. Shall be restricted to parking on-site or in the street right-of-way adjacent to the property. And then there was a next statement that I've just put all in one sentence. It says, said vehicles may not park on any nearby, they said private property without owner permission, and I also view it as nearby improved street right-of-way, or, however we want to phrase it. But this is the big problem we're having, is the maintenance vehicles, service vehicles, construction vehicles. They are parking wherever they find a place, and it's damaging things. It's tearing up right-of-way all over the place, and it's damaging people's driveways and yards where these vehicles are pulling into adjacent private property. So I've been trying to find ways to address that. And again, since I was able to find something in writing in another town, I kind of lumped it together. And as I said above, I think that we should consider in our construction provisions in Part 151 The construction vehicles may not park on private property next to a job site without owner permission. All damage to right-of-way or private property shall be the sole responsibility of the general contractor to correct before a certificate of occupancy shall be issued, which another town is actually doing. So again, I'm trying to look for consistency across things, but I would like to see us better define where contractor, construction, maintenance, and service vehicles park and start to train these guys a bit better. 20%, it's the 80-20. 80% of them are doing a good job, but 20% of them are ripping things up. And I know I have a contractor sitting to my left.
I promise you, Pat, I'm not gonna argue. I do build houses, it's Brian, and when you gotta build one in the middle of two, you got a problem to start with, so we actually, have gone so far as carpooling guys to the job and things like that. But if you're talking about Saturdays at Holden Beach, I don't know how you're gonna fix it. You know, we do the best we can to stay out of the road and out of people's way, and we do ask our neighbors for permission, and we tear their stuff up, and we go back and fix it at the end, so I see what you're saying, and towns do have deposits on things like sidewalks. If a construction effort destroys the town sidewalk or something like that, we have to fix it and put it back, so we're under scrutiny all the time. We're building the houses, I can promise you that. So, but this is a problem, but I don't know. I don't know the answer. I mean, we're all just trying to go to work, and it won't be long, and there won't be much construction over here because it's getting built out pretty quick. But we really try to do the best we can, but I don't know how to change it to fix it. I mean, we don't last a minute on Ocean Boulevard if we're on that sidewalk before one of the boys and girls in blue comes and moves us, so.
It's already addressed in the staff copy. There's
It's,
3 words that address everything you've mentioned. Where it says on a specific permitted location.
Yeah.
Because that gives just enough discretion, and I'll give you an example. Just not far past Jimmy Hobbs's house, 160-ish, 162. It was really tight. Chris Morrison had that house, and it was really tight, and they tried hard. They're in the 80 percentile. But at one point we stopped, and they had to move some cars across the street opposite the sidewalk to accommodate better flow on the sidewalk, and fortunately, there was enough right-of-way open area that they could park on the other side of the road, and it made it safer than all the cars piled up halfway on the lot they were building on. So, I mean, I absolutely agree, and I know and there's also some other state laws on private property. If somebody's building next to your house, and the contractor pulls in to your driveway, you can, with our assistance or without our assistance, you're actually authorized to have that vehicle towed at their expense without ever involving us.
Yes,
So,
but what happens is, because there's so many houses that are only occupied part of the time, there's nobody to call at that house. So, I mean, I think that's the whole point of the, you know, use private property with owner permission. And again, you know, we're talking about that 20%. We're not talking about the 80%. We're talking about the 20% that's doing damage. And that stipulation that everything has to be made good before the certificate of occupancy would also mean if there's damage on nearby private property. Now, Tim, maybe you already do that?
We don't,
I'd like to interject that inserting, I don't know where this is going to end up, but inserting the town as some type of arbitrator in a private property dispute before the building inspector can issue a certificate of occupancy is not appropriate.
It's also illegal. can't hold a certificate of occupancy because the building's on
If they've done the damage, if they've done the damage.
Yeah, even if they've done the damage, you can't, you really, it's almost to the point now where you can't hold up a permit, a CO for a part of anything other than what's just absolutely attached to that house. And the reason they did that is because you could have you could hold up a CO because of the sidewalk having, that's why we get a deposit. You can't, you really cannot hold up a certificate of occupancy based off of the building to it. You can't.
I'll say one thing, Pat, since I'm a contractor over here. If you park in your neighbor's driveway and they don't want you there, they're pretty quick. There's somebody on that street's pretty quick to let you know to not do it anymore. And then, we try to respect that. And fortunately for most of us, we know a lot of people and we do ask and say, hey, we're gonna be building this house beside you. It's gonna be, just bear with us. I mean, sometimes we fail at what we try to do correct, but I mean, it's not intentional. So I just,
And I think Frank has the verbiage you said that's necessary to do any enforcements.
That's the important thing.
Well, I would recommend that you have definitions of permitted location. Is that permitted as in a location that's got a building permit? Or is that permitted as in we permit it?
Good point.
I think it was left that way and phrased specifically that way to accommodate landscapers as well. Because you don't need a permit to do landscaping work, but you do need to be able to park
Well,
near the property.
I hate to correct you, but if you're gonna exceed 30% of the impervious area, you're gonna need a permit to landscape.
Well, I meant,
You got real stormwater issues.
Well,
mowing grass.
Put that out there.
no, I meant mowing grass is what I meant.
and I would say some of the worst violators are a couple of the landscape, the maintenance people who will just, they don't park on the property that they're working on, they park someplace else. And it's usually somebody else's right-of-way, or down by me, they just park in one of the lanes of the road. So, I mean, this could be better phrased, you're right, Tim, for specific permitted location. So what is that really supposed to
It really
mean?
should be we permitted, not permitted, because you can be doing work that the statute don't allow us to issue a permit for, it might be exempt, but you're still doing work. So it shouldn't be what it has a building permit, it should be what permitted or what we allow. Because they're not gonna be allowed to park unless they have a building permit, and there's a lot of work that's done without that.
let me ask you a question, Frank, that I don't know, or Jeremy, either one. You got a big truck and there ain't nowhere to put it. You couldn't put it on your lot if you had to, a tractor trailer of some sort, big box truck, something like that, and you're trying to, I don't know, drop a load of trusses or lumber on a house or whatever, and I see them, the sensible ones pull out the cones and cone it off and try to take care of the area while they're unloading the thing, but that's not allowed for just a framer or, somebody like that. It's just, is it utility people that can do that? Lumber companies? Where's the line drawn between the person that could do that? You just have to use a common sense kind of thing there?
It really just comes down to common sense. I mean, I've done it personally, and I've seen some of our other officers do it. If we see that something like that, you can't, we're gonna put 18 out there on the boulevard. And we pulled up with blue lights on, and if we have to sit there for 20 minutes while they get unloaded, maybe keep traffic moving as best we can, we still have to use some common sense with it, whether it's covered in here or not. It comes down to some common decency of how much you can work with people to help them out.
I'm just thinking of a landscaper, since that's what we're talking about. You got a 20-foot truck and you got a 24-foot trailer and you got the door down to get your lawnmower out. I mean, there is nowhere to park.
They're not, and that comes down to, there's a difference between an 18-wheeler that comes over here once every 6 months to drop off trusses, and the guy who's over here every Tuesday, and we can't just follow them around with blue lights on.
No.
Traffic.
That's,
I don't know the answer to it, but yeah, there's definitely an issue there.
I think historically too, the way I was trained and the common sense that applies there too is the fire truck rule. For all of most of your yard maintenance folks, so we don't confuse them with landscapers, a lot of them still park on the side street right in the middle of the road. And when I see it, what I try to look at is, can a big ladder truck going to a house fire get by his trailer? Because most of them have gotten to where we've kind of gotten them trained, at least outside of the gated areas, to get onto the right-of-way as best they can. But, I mean, I don't want to call the man's name out, but you got a couple with 20-foot trailers that are 8.5 foot wide. And especially down in the Shell Street area, and down, there's no right-of-way that they can get into because of post and rope and other impediments. So if a fire truck can get by, we kind of have applied the common sense rule there. So, and I don't know how you put that on paper. I really don't know how you make that clear.
I wouldn't, I just want to know how you guys looked at it. There's no alternative for it. There is none. And a lot of people in this town want to get their grass mowed and stuff like that by somebody else, so they're going to have to park somewhere to do it. And their swimming pool's clean and everything else. So that's why I was asking. And it really is for the trucks and the trailers and that type of thing, because a car or a pool clean comes that they can get off the road usually. So I was wondering.
Is there some suggested language, maybe for the second sentence of 7202 D2 to make that more clear in the specific permitted location? You got any thoughts?
I'm still working on the left. I heard comments about 3,000. What about, and I know I'm speaking for everybody else on the road. What about when you go by a job site and the guy's got plenty of room to park?
That's where your discretion comes in. If he's got a place to get off the road, there ain't no sense to be on the road.
I'm not very discretionary when I see that. That's just
No,
me
you're not.
speaking for me.
You're not, that's for sure.
Anyway,
Can you simply say private contractor or maintenance service vehicles while performing legitimate services at a specific location, except, because then that hones in on who are you, if you're a landscape contractor, you have a specific location you're servicing. Does that solve the problem? It doesn't link to permitted, it's what is the address that you're doing it at?
I would say yes. I mean, that would be easy to quantify if you had to. Don't you think? That would be really easy, just walk up there and say where you're working.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
and
I
then-
think that would be.
because I
And
go
then
out a
that
lot.
covers you across the street.
I do it a lot. I just walk out and say, I know you're not taking care of my lawn. Please would you not be parked in my stone bed where I have irrigation? Something like that. But,
I think that's a perfect example of less is more.
okay, so
To
then.
change it to that.
So then it would simply be private contractor or maintenance service vehicles while performing legitimate services at a specific location except.
I'd actually suggest that at the location receiving services.
That's even better.
At a specific location receiving services, except.
Okay. Then I had a question from somebody about, occasionally you'll see a sign that's maybe deaf child in the neighborhood or something like that. Are signs like that going to be absolutely forbidden, or can they be put up at the discretion and permission of the town?
I think that question comes from, that jumps all the way down to 7203B, correct? Is that where you're at with that question?
Probably, I just had made a note of it here for some reason, but, yeah,
If you're gonna allow signs like that, we need to do it too.
well, that's what I meant, so signage can be done, but town's gonna approve it.
Yeah, we have signs now that are not allowed, but you can have signs that are approved.
Okay,
And what it does is there's a regulatory requirement for, so if you want to have those kinds of signs that are approved, we'll probably need to go in there and take a look at it and see
okay.
what those things.
Oh, I can answer the question of the person, so, all right, sorry,
Well,
sorry.
Pat, before we go further down the list, can I inject something, please?
Mm-hmm,
On 7202, when you get down to D where the exceptions are, they accept emergency and government vehicles, private utility vehicles that have been using for an emergency. Is there some way we could add, Frank, how could we add, like, for people that are minding the turtles that park in a location?
They're covered in D. Turtle Patrol gets government funding, correct?
Yes, sir. So that would be covered in that, we wouldn't have to specify that.
I would say they're covered in D, and it covers the actual Turtle Patrol folks with their green piece of paper and not the spectators.
Yes, sir.
Which has been more of the parking issue we've had with Turtle Nest.
With the spectators?
Yes.
Okay, well, I was gonna cover that here, and then when we get with, Auto Connect, we need to have somewhere that they know about that also.
I think Mr. Marwitz did a really good job when he was running the Turtle Patrol of carpooling with folks that were spectating to it in the past.
Yes, sir, they would come
They're,
usually.
they're certainly covered and given a method to get there.
Okay, just wanted to be sure. Thank you, Pat, excuse me for interrupting.
okay. So, we've gotten to the 7202 D exceptions where we said if we wanted to put something about loading or unloading, this would be the place to put it. So, does the board want to get into that about loading and unloading? I mean, Brian raised a good point. It's not just people stopping and picking people up. It's trolleys now, too. That may take more brain power than us
Is that under
commissioners
D
have
exception?
relative to staff.
That maybe
As
be the
as a starting point, we may want to have the police department to inventory and assess the most appropriate places for trolley stops. I'm thinking in particular of access to, or locations adjacent to public accesses, because, but that's a specific, I don't know if what you're thinking about is a general type of description for loading and unloading. I was just going leapfrogging into the specifics of the best place to demarc for drop-off of trolley stop.
I might have it. The locations definitely probably need an assessment, but in 03B signage, page 5 on the,
Signage, right?
I think if we add a B, C, or one of those, just designated loading zones maybe.
Yeah.
That gives you, and then that still points you back to board approval, because it stays in line with the rest of the ordinance, so we can't just go drop a sign in without some kind of guidance.
I just think it needs to be considered because people are gonna wanna be able to come over and drop people off. We need to go ahead and try to deal with that a little bit if we can, to try to make, try to accommodate them doing that and not getting in, it's gonna take a little while to unload 4 or 5 kids and a cooler and some beach chairs and whatever else they bring. I mean, so it's gonna take, 4 or 5 minutes possibly. So I think we need to try to accommodate that if we can. And the trolley, if that's what happens, I mean, they're gonna be big. So I can think of some great places to do it that wouldn't impede, but we don't have them yet. So, something to think about.
Well, I agree with you. I think it's a good place to put it, and putting it there then leaves it to everybody, we gotta figure out where those zones are. But to put it in right now doesn't hurt anything while we define the zones, right?
I would agree to add that language and then, follow what.
Figure it
town
out
manager-
soon.
Right.
Figure it out soon.
So that's under signage, you can make that a D.
That would be C, wouldn't it?
Okay.
Okay. If we go back to right before 7203, the restriction of not parking in lawful parking areas between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. it kind of disappeared from this, but I saw it was still in one of the auto documents, so I think it just got inadvertently left off. But I think 7202E should be something like, it shall be a violation of this chapter to leave standing any portion of a vehicle in any authorized parking space between the hours of 2 a.m. and 5 p.m., 5 a.m., sorry, 5 a.m., not p.m., because again, it was in our ordinance before, and it just kind of got, I guess, lost. There was no specific reason it was removed, is there? It just got kind of inadvertently.
To be honest with you, I don't know if they got removed because we didn't see the purpose for it, or if it was an accident. I'm just gonna be honest with you. So my question would be, is why can't you park there from 2 to 5?
We were,
If we put it back in there, it's fine.
this goes back about 4 years to the discussions about trying to keep particularly the areas around the bridge, the parks, the lots and stuff, where there were concerns about drugs, there were concerns about inappropriate behavior, and from 2 to 5 was sort of a time that also goes along with a lot of what a lot of other cities are doing that are trying to address the same concerns. So that was why it was put in there. It's a little bit harder when you start talking about now we have designated spaces, because it's not just saying around the parks but it's the same concept. Okay, so that's why it was added.
My only thoughts are, if you would, say in front of some of the restaurants under the bridge, if you have somebody that is unable to drive, and they call for somebody to drive for them, and they leave the car here, that looks like that would be a better solution than them getting in the car and trying to drive it away.
The 2 to 5 would not apply on private lots, like in the restaurant parking lot. Now, if they're parked across the street in Jordan, then it would
Correct.
apply. And I'll just tell you my personal experience, we run off more efficiently in 2 to 5 than we have anybody else in the city. So, it's just my personal experience. We run off more people that are just trying to enjoy the amenities that we have here.
Fishing at night when they're not bothering anybody. Makes sense.
We have an ordinance that would prohibit sleeping in your vehicle from 11 a.m. to 6, or 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. And that has always been our way of, until this was passed, when this was added to parking, that was always our way in, to somebody parked in an area that was up to no good. And as Chief said, fishermen and shellers and the people using actually town facilities to fish were the ones we were running off with the 2 to 5 thing.
Again, all I'm going to say is 4 years ago, this actually was, the public was extremely receptive of this. They wanted it, and if you know, there's part of the, I understand what you're saying, that it's kind of good people that are impacted by it. If you do away with it, you may get more bad people joining in. So, I mean, I've gotten a lot of feedback on the fact that this was missing. Yeah. Now, we can, you know, there are ways, and some other towns are doing it, they specify which lots. So if your attitude would be, we should still allow parking where the fishermen park their trailers, then, you know, then that can be put in if it's about the fishermen. But for the most part, it's been in and around the bridge and out by the different parks that everybody really wanted to see controlled.
I hate to say anything, somebody send me a text, I he's talking about, okay, I hate to put anything on the police department, but, and I hate to take away, because you've got real good valid points, but whenever, I know when that was done, I was involved in it, and I remember everything about it. And my thoughts at that time are the same as they are now. We have numerous ordinances on the books that stop people from doing the very thing that they're trying to stop by not letting people park there. And my point being is that if you don't want people sleeping in the car, we already have them there. If you don't want people having a party out there at night, we have noise ordinances and that kind of thing. So I don't understand how stopping people from parking there would keep them from having, in other words, how you change behavior by having a designated time for parking. In other words, people could still go over there and do the same things, even if they're not parking. And that was my thought back then was that this is one of those lesser and more things, that you have no parking between between 2 and 5. I think that's what we changed it to. So what goes between 2 and 5, that's basically a 3-hour period. Anybody that's ever done any fishing, any decent fisherman's got to get up before day, and he's going to go fishing. He's going to be out there earlier than normal. And he's not a problem. We know those guys aren't a problem. They're fishing. So it would have to be a group of people or an individual, but it would be no different than them parking at a house and having the same. I mean, and you don't have any rules against that. So I'm just wondering why we don't rely on the ordinances that are in the book to cover the 2 to 5 a.m. as long as the behavior is what we're trying to control, not parking.
I could raise the point as well of houses that have insufficient parking at them that suddenly start to dump all their cars in the lots and then stay there from, it would be after 5 o'clock, and stay there all night and use parking spaces, for example, on a Sunday, where you would have people coming for a concert. I mean, that was a reservation as well about having houses with too many people, and their solution to the parking issue is to go to the public lots, which is, again, not something that we actually want to see. But the safety in terms of making it easy that there aren't a lot of cars in these, under the bridge, in these parking lots in the deep of night, was a fairly simple safety issue that people considered useful. And again, it does mirror what a lot of the other municipalities are doing. So I frankly, we've had it on the books for about 4 years. I don't think it's done harm. I would, again, the fact that it's there reduces the likelihood of people coming over here in the middle of the night, so I think there's a benefit to it. And the public has been supportive of it as well. So I don't see a reason to remove it.
I would say this, I do fish when I can, and if I left to go fishing and I put in at the boat ramp down here, I would not want to be included in that, because we would leave at 4 o'clock in the morning, so I would hope, I know we don't have any boat trailer parking spaces much, but the few that we do have, I would like to see them omitted from that, and I'm not up. It's been 10 years since I've been up till 2 o'clock in the morning, but I'm definitely up at 4, and I don't see anybody, so I don't know what kind of problems.
No, again, we can specifically omit the boat. I mean, again, I've seen other towns, other island towns that do that. Some of them put every place that you can't park, and some of them say with the exception of, and there were a couple towns that, with the exception of basically boats with empty trailers. In other words, they know that they're off fishing.
So that would be my next question, when we put this in. Do you prefer for it to be like boats with trailers, or trucks with boat trailers, or would you prefer to be specific lots?
I would prefer to just rule out, just say with the exception of the boats with, the trucks with trailers.
What if you had,
Yeah, what if
But
you got a whole boat full of people?
well, they've got to be in the lot that they're meant to be, in the place where they're meant to be.
yeah, and they surf fish, and then somebody,
I-
if they couldn't all get in the truck that was pulling the boat, they got another car with them, and if they're fishing off the town dock down here, they're not doing, I mean,
I think you're tying the police department's hands by putting this back in, to be candid. As Mr. Evans has already said, there are many ordinances and a bunch of state law that we're going to use if we find drugs or other things going on, that we're going to, if I find somebody snorting cocaine at 3 a.m., I'm not writing them a parking ticket. I'm taking them to jail for felony possession of cocaine. And I'm still not writing a parking ticket
I just
for 2
think,
to 5.
you know,
So if you leave it out, the shark fishermen who fish in the dark in the summer can still come fish. But the sleeping in your vehicles and the boat ramp and stuff, I think we have the discretion, and we have the guys out there that can address it accordingly. And the other thing is, if the public sees it, we're here 24/7. They need to call 911 and not wait till the next morning to tell us.
I'm sure there's somebody that's gonna muddy the water, but, I mean, when I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to work, I see 2 things usually. Maybe one other person that's gotten up that early that has the unfortunate job that I do, and 2 police officers. So you're not gonna come over here with your lights on at that time of day and not drive down the beach and not get, you know, I just don't think you get away with much.
I found one breaking and entering suspect parked in public parking when I was working night shift. In the 16 years I've been here, one time where they parked in public parking, and he was parked on Jordan Boulevard, dragging TVs down the beach. But one incident. Every other time, they back under the house or an adjacent house.
Yeah. You're not gonna stop that no matter what you do.
Well, with our full complement of police officers now, I believe
never have.
you guys are on top of this to the point, whether it's in there or not, you guys got it covered.
I think having it in here is a deterrent. I think having it is a deterrent. I mean, you may have one instance, but it's a deterrent if it's clear that the police are going to be looking for an empty parking lot. And you can, yes. I mean, we can do, if we ever do get a boat trailer parking area, we can treat it separately. But I understand the people who want to go out on their boats early, they're fishing. But the rest of it, to me, It's been there, people have confidence and comfort in it, and it's a deterrent. I mean, that's my opinion. I am one commissioner, but that is my opinion.
I'm
He
asking,
just asked me if not allowing parking at the county accesses where we're supposed to have available parking, that's not taking any parking. And I don't know, that would be, I think that would be better than the attorney. I don't know if that's.
Well, again, I would say that every beach town that has a similar statement has been through the same questions. We are not the only beach town that has this. So, I mean, do I need to make a motion that we keep this statement?
I was about to ask, where are we trying to go?
Well, I've been going one by one on what I was suggesting, and when they argue that it isn't needed, I'm fine with that. But this one, I feel strongly, I mean, I move that we maintain the no parking between the hours of 2 a.m. and 5 a.m.
For the purpose of resolving this issue in review, right?
Mhm.
You're not formally trying to make it,
Yeah, and revert to what we had,
okay.
with the omission of boat trailers.
Okay. For the purpose of doing our homework, is there a second? Hearing none, back to you.
Okay, if we go to the next page, I found it confusing, the way things were written, and I just suggested that we start 7203 with parking permits will be required from April 1st through October 31st between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. each day. No person shall park a vehicle in any designated parking area or location without first obtaining a valid permit unless a specific exemption exists in 7202, and then go on to the rates, because the statement that was written was, I thought, more confusing than it needed to be. And then it simply goes on to the rates, and I believe that we need to add an annual permit, that you can have an annual rate permit available for either one or two vehicles. I think it's important somebody can get an annual permit just for one vehicle at half the cost of two vehicles. But I also, I think we need to address this. I don't think annual permits should be available for rental golf carts. Okay, if somebody rents a golf cart here for a vacation week, there's a weekly permit available. I think that only golf carts registered to property owners should be able to get an annual permit. And I would like to suggest that we figure this out and manage it.
Pat, I think that's just about an unmanageable thing.
Not if
I mean, it's
we-
really gonna make it difficult to, I think a permit's a permit, whether it's, my car, your car, or somebody's rental vehicle. As long as they've got a permit, that vehicle's permitted for the,
The problem is whoever, the owner of the golf cart is gonna be the one ticketed, not the person that's rented it for the week.
correct.
that's our biggest collection issue
That's right.
currently,
Right.
is we're having to reach out to the different rental companies to, try to make sure we reach out during the week that the cart was parked illegally, the vehicle, because I need to get away from golf cart because they can't be registered or driven on a highway. But allowing the rental companies to purchase an annual permit mitigates the collections probably at 100%, mitigates. And I'm not sure it's legal to specifically preclude a registered a type of registered motor vehicle from purchasing such permit. I'm not sure that's actually legal because you are singling out a DMV registered vehicle.
Mr. Green, you have any comment on that?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm gonna have to delve into it.
Well, again,
My
with,
understanding is that you've got, vehicle is registered.
Yeah, because all we allow is the LSVs, which are registered, inspected. They have a regular registration plate on, just like the car. And we have precluded all golf carts, so we don't do what the sheriff's department does off the island with stickers. So I think by not allowing a business that rents low-speed vehicles, you are precluding a specific type of vehicle, number one, but then you're turning around and allowing it if somebody on the island owns it and has it properly registered. I think that the rental companies will be beating the doors down, and they'd be coming to see you, and you'd have to tell them you had a conflict, is what I think.
I got a question for you, Frank, if I may. Those rental low-speed vehicles, they have a license, right?
Yes, sir.
It's a state license.
Yes, sir.
Right? Okay.
Issued by North Carolina DMV.
That issued by North Carolina DMV, which is the source of, a part of the source of the revenue that the town, that the state provides to the town through the POW bill appropriation. So you're not going to be able to exclude by location of only the people or rental cars that are housed at Holden Beach are provided a license, unless you want to jeopardize your POW bill appropriation on an annual basis.
Also, in speaking with Mr. Varner with Otto, I don't think he has the ability to differentiate that way.
also, we're gonna have to, again, just as you were saying, Frank, that when the ticket is written to the registered owner of the vehicle via the tag. And it's sometimes difficult to get that information back to the rental agency so they can get a hold of the people while they're in hand instead of trying to chase them down all over the country. So that's something we're gonna have to work with Otto on to try to see if we can get that addressed where we can get those companies notified that there has been an infraction so they can get back with their lease, the person that rented the car and get them to pay for the violation. So we're gonna have to, we got our work cut out for us there anyway.
Jessica had established a pretty good relationship with most of them, and she's passed that on to our administrative assistant, who's actually, for 2021, collected all but 37 parking citations. So anything that was outstanding, she's got it down to 37. So there's an established communication, but the annual pass would mitigate that even further.
Okay, if it's illegal, it's illegal.
There was two parts to that, Pat. I do think that somebody with, a single person with a single car should be able to get a single parking permit for half the price.
I agree with that also, Brother.
Because, if you're by yourself and you got one car, you don't need two, so. I do agree with that.
Would it be more prudent than to change it to just one? If you're gonna cut the price in half, just change
What
it,
difference does it make? Exactly.
change it,
Well,
change the
yeah.
ordinance language to one and change the fee schedule appropriately?
Well, I think we did that because if you have a boat and trailer, it's if you buy the rate for the two,
Right.
right? So I would do a one and then a two.
One or two.
Okay. We're almost done with my various. The parking authorized, okay, the next page. Parking is authorized without a permit outside of the specified hours in 7203A1, but only in designated authorized parking areas pursuant to this chapter. Okay, so I want to be sure I understand this. So is this saying that there is no parking in right-of-way adjacent to your home unless it's a designated spot ever?
That was part of the
Okay.
initial tasker to do away with right-of-way
Okay.
parking on the side streets.
Okay,
So-
that was, okay, I'm gonna come back to, I know that there was a survey done that supposedly over 90% of the people say they don't want right-of-way parking ever. However, I don't believe the majority of them understands that that means it applies to their own vehicles. Yeah, I know, okay, so this is a case of people didn't understand what they were voting for, because we went through this one 4 or 5 years ago too. People want to be able to put their cars or family cars in the right-of-way adjacent to their own home when they need to. And we danced around this 4 or 5 years ago, and there was discussion about, couldn't we use the hurricane stickers as a sign that, you know, you are an owner, but it was agreed, too difficult to see, and they're out there too broadly. So, I mean, I did put in a December memo that went in the packet, you know, that couldn't we use the same technology as is being used by Auto for Parking to have owners on the island register 2 license plates per property, that those are allowed in right-of-way adjacent to their homes. We don't have time to do that for this season, okay? I think we are in a big mess if we say people cannot put their own cars in the right-of-way adjacent to their homes outside of 9 to 5, but certainly in the months where there is no paid parking. Okay? And I would rather, if we had been a couple months earlier, we might have been able to address this with the technology, but I don't think there's time. But I think at this point in time, we have to write something for this year that parking in the right-of-way is going to be allowed outside of 9 to 5, April 1st to October 31st, because frankly, people are expecting that they can park in the right-of-way adjacent to their home when they need to, when they have parties, when they have family visit. Again, I think that they answered a survey question without understanding what it meant.
I think you might be in the same situation we just talked about with DMV registered motor vehicles with the POW bill money and stuff like that. I think it's all or none. Either I can come and park at in the
No,
right of way in front of your house, or
there,
nobody can.
You-
And I may be wrong, but I think that is
you
accurate.
can deal with it. You can deal with it. We've had several legal opinion differences before, but there has been legal opinion that you can designate right-of-way for residents. You can designate certain streets legally. The question was whether or not, if a resident was identified, were they limited to only their own right-of-way? That was the question mark. But we need to work this one out for the future, but all I'm saying right now is, while this is up in the air, I do not believe this year we can make a blanket, there is no parking in the right-of-way ever again. I do not believe that's what people want. I don't think they would have voted yes had they understood. I have people nodding out here. So I think we should simply, at this point, again, I've tried to write something, there will be no parking in the street right-of-way except in designated places from April 1st to October 31st between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. as stipulated in 7203A. Parking in the street right-of-way outside these times will be enforced according to the prohibitions and exceptions outlined in 7202BCD. And then between now and next November, we need to work on how do we repair this. And I'd like to understand how are you, either one of these, how are the police gonna enforce this?
And that's
How is Otto gonna enforce this even during the daytime?
I think it's the all or none, because he uses a license plate recognition scanning system. And if you don't pay on his app or by phone or the methods he provides, you enter your license plate when you pay.
No.
So that's how he understands it. But if, I know that he can not exempt certain license plates for certain areas, because he and I had a conversation in working on some of this about town staff parking at town hall, how his system addressed that. And if the tag is entered in his system as exempt from parking as, say, a police vehicle or a fire truck, it is exempt from parking on Holden Beach. It is not only exempted from one specific location.
Well, what I'm saying is how is it going to be enforced? Brunswick Avenue is going to have no parking, okay? And if people have built those parking pads all the way to the road, or they have a lot of rock, and they have people parking parallel to the road in what is the right-of-way adjacent to their home, it's not specifically in their driveway. How is that enforced? I mean, that's illegal.
I can tell you how we've enforced it historically. If it's been approved as part of the CO issuance, if the landscaping's been approved and it's not a public safety access issue, we don't address it.
I understand
So-
that, but Otto is going to be driving their people are going to be driving the island looking for violations. Not, right? All the streets, right? You're not splitting it up.
No, they're only doing designated
I
parking.
think they
So
Okay.
you guys are going to continue, you're going to do the no parking streets.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
I wanna clear that up.
Yeah, because
that-
that's very important. If you're going to do the no parking streets, then you know,
Otto's gonna
Otto's just
be,
for his designated spots, right?
he's gonna be patrolling an LPR in the designated paid
You
parking
guys
spots.
are dealing with the rest, and I
The-
just,
We had a conversation, Mr. Varner and I, about that too, about how he was gonna address, specifically the handicap areas. And he asked if we preferred he call us, so we can make sure that, there's not a registered owner that just forgot their hanger, because we can run the tag and get that information sometimes.
okay, then, since you guys are going to be doing the streets that have no parking at all, and, I mean, I'm simply saying, I do not believe that we want to have you can't park in the right-of-way ever. And with the, well, you can always go park after 5 o'clock in one of the designated spaces, because that's legal, because I'm sorry, 2/3 of this island has next to no designated spaces, unless you own a golf cart. So that really doesn't work. So I think at this point, we need to simply be blunt that parking in the street right-of-way outside of these times will be enforced according to the prohibitions in 7202 BCD, so that, again, people understand they can park in the right-of-way adjacent to their home as they've been used to doing.
Well, I think in most cases that parking in the right of way, unless you're parking in somebody else's yard, most of the time, these guys, I've had gatherings and had them parked all the way out in the street, along the edge of the street, and they understand there's something going on, and they are attuned to that. But if it was done on a business basis or a continuous basis, they would have some objections. But they usually do pretty good on, as long as it's your cars and you're trying to get them all the way in your driveway, and even though your bumper is right on the edge of the road, they're not gonna, in most cases, they use common sense and enforce it accordingly. So,
When you write something like that, that is truly an enforcement thing, and it will confuse the hell out of the public. So, again, I think we need to sort out what right-of-way parking is going to be for owners that want parking adjacent. And again, I kept one legal opinion from a couple years ago. The town attorney said, under these circumstances, it could be done. Other towns do have certain areas that they talk about neighborhood parking, and you have to have a sticker. And if we have to go that way to make it work, it can get worked out, it's just it takes time. But I don't think for this year we should have a blanket statement about there is no right-of-way parking except in designated areas, because that is how I read this. And if that's how it's meant to be, then you're basically ignoring what the ordinance is saying you're supposed to enforce, and that's never a good thing.
I think the other part of that makes it harder than just a sticker is the rental properties that exist on the side streets where this area is. I don't know how you manage it other than restricting it completely and then adding something back, but you're still gonna miss something. I don't have a solution. I don't know how you manage it properly. And it's a nightmare to enforce once you figure out how to put it into some kind of wording. And the current stickers for hurricanes,
It doesn't work.
they don't work because they're not Mylar, and they're shared like cotton candy already.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we can solve it now. I'm
Right.
suggesting we need to work on it. What I am suggesting is we make it clear in this ordinance that outside of these times, right-of-way parking will be enforced according to the rules of 7202B, C, and D.
That basically reverts back to, it's either you can park in the right of way or you can't.
Well, you can't park in the right-of-way except in designated spaces between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., April 1st, which is the paid parking period.
Right, but I'm saying after that, it's either you can or you can't.
Well, and I'm simply saying for this year,
You go to
you can.
you can't.
And then we will work, and then we need to diligently work on this to figure this out, because again, I just don't think our public understood what they were voting for. Now, if they come back and say, no, we understood, we're fine, but that's not what I'm hearing from people.
No, I get it. I don't think the solution is in the,
It's gonna be one, it's,
right, so that's fine, you can add it back in there, that basically outside of the 9 to 5, April 1st, that it's
Mhm.
pretty much just like it is now, walking right there.
and in November through the end of March, all day, all the time, but I don't see a way around it right now. Does anybody else see a way around this?
I actually think that might be the closest way to,
Put it,
now that I've digested it, I mean, that gets you to the time frame that you can deal with it and figure out some other language.
Okay, then can I move that 7202D be added as written unless the officers, the town, anybody sees a better way to put it?
There may be some lettering changes,
Yeah,
but yeah.
just go through,
Yeah.
look at it.
you can correct it offline if there's lettering.
Because you also found in 7299,
Right,
that was a good catch. That's from sharing a Word document back and forth in Word auto-correcting.
right, okay.
Okay, that motion's for working purposes, right?
Right,
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, discussion, more discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay? What's next?
Oh, just the catching the 7207B 6 or 7, which I think was acknowledged. That's it.
That's it.
Thank you for bearing with me with all my questions.
Madam Clerk, do you have any questions of what we've gone through? Are you crystal clear? Okay. Are we at the point for,
Fee schedule.
all right, who's going to speak to that?
I don't have the RFP, and I don't remember the minimum fee schedule for the town of Holden Beach. What his minimum, fee was. I'm thinking it's $3 an hour. I'm not sure that's correct. I don't want us to be a burden on anybody, and we need the revenue help to deal with the amount of people that are coming over here, and that's why I feel like that this town is putting this into place. As much as we hate to do it, I don't think any of us wants to implement paid parking ever. I mean, I'd love for the place to be free, but it's not. It costs a lot of money to provide facilities, or think about providing facilities, or keep up parking spaces, or haul off trash, or whatever. So I'm in for lowering the parking fee, somewhat, at least the first year. Because of exactly what I said. It's not a money grab. The town's, we just need a little help. We don't need to put any more burden on people than we have to. I would recommend for the first year that the prices of what we originally rolled out be dropped to his auto, the vendor's minimum by the hour, and then proportionally from there up to a day price. So, and I don't have that number, so I can't speak to it, but if it's $3, if that's his minimum, that's where I say we go. And then we proportionally increase it to a day price from there if it's $15 or whatever it ends up being. And at least for this first year. And we're gonna have some hiccups. I think we need to roll it out for a lot of reasons, because our bathrooms are in shambles, and we need to improve some stuff. And, but I think we need to start off a little bit slower than we're going right now, and that's just my opinion. I don't know if I'll have the board's consensus or not, but, that's my motion to get with. I can't state the numbers, but I definitely in favor of dropping the pricing, so it's more affordable. I have tons and tons of emails, tons of conversations with people on the mainland side, as well as people on Holden Beach that use these parking spaces periodically, and I just think we need to baby step, so to speak, into this stuff, into changing the ordinance and all of it. I think we need to take it slow. I'm not saying we don't put it in effect, but I think we can start off a little smaller than we're doing right now, than was proposed. So I'll make a motion that I can't really exactly state, that we go to Otto's lowest allowable number on parking by the hour, that he can actually afford to be a vendor, and then proportionally increase it from there.
Brian, I would actually suggest we simply, based on Otto's agreement, why don't we agree that $3 an hour, $15 a day is our target, based on Otto's feedback?
That's fine.
Yeah, and we can reduce the per week rate by $10 to $70. And we can keep the annual rate where it is, but we are going to allow a single vehicle as well as a single vehicle at 125, two at 250.
I'm okay with that. I think we just need to,
Pat, I think,
Just in favor of
I'm not against reducing the price at all. That's, probably, the best way to segue into this paid parking. But I do remember when we first started, when we were all on the parking committee, that there was a figure that made it worth processing the credit card. And that figure, we need to find out what that is before we arbitrarily to start picking prices. I think, it's unfortunate that Jim was unable to be with us this evening, but I think that's something that we can, discuss between now and when we implement this to set a reduced rate. We can agree on the reduced rate.
Okay.
I'm good with that. But we need, before we, go to the vendor and he says, well, $3.25 is as cheap as we can go, $3.50. I agree we need to reduce it, but we need to make it where it's workable for the processing of the way the parking operates.
Okay.
So I'm good on that, and I just, we're gonna have a limited amount of parking spaces, so it's gonna be people with permits and stuff, we're gonna give a permit, it's gonna be more like a hunting license. They're gonna have so many parking places. When they're all full, then they have to go hunting for one, and then it's gonna be difficult, especially as they try to move to the western end of the island. So we've got some things that we need to really look at to make sure that we can, not that we have to accommodate anybody, but we need to make sure that there are places for them to go to the beach, even if it's at a reduced rate. I think we still need to look at the possibility of putting them in places where they're accustomed to going and they have facilities and accesses to the beach.
something that may be, the same concept along the same lines is maybe we could, and if we don't change the pricing, if we could offer a free day or half day or something like that in the, let's say on a Monday, Tuesday, you could give a free day, so to speak, for people that just couldn't afford to pay to come over here would be able to come. So that's another option I think maybe we could do.
Tomorrow morning or an afternoon. one or
Yeah,
the other.
something, just something.
That's not a bad idea. And we need to also be mindful of, of course, the handicap's taken care of, but our veterans also need to be considered.
So I don't know how that needs to be put into a motion, but I just think he needs to, he just needs to look at it.
I think we need to get what,
We need to get,
We need to get Jim involved.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
here's what I'm gonna say. I think we need to hear from Jim, but the fee schedule becomes part of what we need to approve, and it also goes into his agreement, as I recall. So if we're gonna try to bring this all back at the February BOCM, I hate to say this, but we're gonna need to have another meeting after after the town manager probably, somebody speaks to Jim about this, so that we can agree the fee schedule in time to go into the February package.
I think the first thing we need to do is to find out what we're talking about
Yeah, somebody needs to speak to Jim.
before we start going any further, so. When will we have that fee schedule that he's got minimum numbers in?
Well, he's got to base it on the reduced number of parking spaces, correct? When the original based on,
Yeah, it was based on a number that we thought we would have, which has
Right.
obviously been way reduced and could be reduced further, without, I'm not gonna say it, but I mean, we could lose more spaces that we think we're gonna have, and it comes down to his willingness to put it in place at a lower rate. So we have to talk to him. I think, I mean, he's the vendor. So I don't, if, with him not being here and with us not being able to discuss it with him, then I don't know how that meeting we need to have another, we're gonna have to talk to him. Somebody's gonna have to talk to him.
For the motion that you made, I don't think that's a problem if we go back and talk to Jim and bring back his proposal in the fee schedule at the next meeting. If you want to change it at the next meeting, you are allowed to amend ordinances and resolutions that we present. So we can just talk to Jim, I mean, because the packet's gonna be going out at the beginning of next week. I don't know if you're gonna be able to meet before that or not.
The next meeting you're talking about is,
The regular meeting.
We are asking for him to figure out the minimum of what we need to execute the plan, so that's gonna be a fixed number, the minimum.
What's the board consensus on lowering the rate? I mean, are we all in agreement there?
If it's possible, yes.
If it's possible, he may not be able to lower it much past what's based on the number of parking
Right,
spots, because we've
yeah,
taken
I'm-
out the pier. So we just have to get I would just make a motion to ask for his minimum requirement to execute the parking plan at this point, to present at the next meeting.
we can just direct the town manager to get that.
Okay.
Is
Just
that
let,
okay, Mr. Hewitt?
That's good with me.
just let him know it's our consensus, that's where we're headed, to drop it.
We've had to mark off quite a few parking places,
Okay,
which is a shame, but
what else on parking?
I think the services agreement will be changed to reflect some of the things we've talked about, and we can deal with that at the BOCM.
Okay. Mr. Hewitt, we got anything, or Madam Clerk, we got anything else before we get the report from our attorney on the executive session? Is that next?
Yes.
All right, anybody want to,
I make a motion that we go into executive session.
all right. You want to read your little speech there?
Executive session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11A5 to instruct the staff or agent concerning the negotiation of the price and terms of contracts concerning the acquisition of real property.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. It's unanimous. Thank you all for being here today. Okay, is there a motion we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all right.
Second. All in favor? Aye.